Hello and welcome back to Azure Terraformer. It's release day. Ring that bell. 3.47 dropped today. So we'll be reviewing the release notes, seeing what's new, what's fixed, and the good, bad, and the ugly. Here we go. So only one new resource here, Azure Sentinel Metadata. Looks like a secondary resource for the Sentinel service. So last release we saw how Sentinel works. It's basically a solution that sits on top of Azure Log Analytics, and so the Sentinel metadata, it attaches to a Log Analytics workspace and then a content ID. The content ID looks like it relates to this Sentinel rule alert NRT, which this clearly has like a custo query embedded in here. So what I'm guessing is with the NRT rules, we run custo queries and we set, if that thing happens, the severity of this alert, right? High, medium, low. And these, the metadata, it has a kind. Let's go look at the kind attribute. Okay, so we have analytics rule template, automation rule, Azure function. The parent is the NRT, the content is the NRT. I'm curious as to what this is actually doing, and it's clearly configuring the NRT rule in some capacity, but the analytics rule appears to correlate to what this thing is, the NRT. So would we attach this to a different, like if it wasn't attached to an NRT rule, would we use a different kind? Like we wouldn't use analytics rule, we'd use, if we used hunting query or data type, would we attach it to a different resource? So I think I haven't gotten to Sentinel on my blog yet, and maybe Sentinel's an area we can go deep dive on in future episodes. But yeah, it definitely has quite a few resources here, and there's most of them appear to be connectors, which is kind of the nature of the Sentinel service. So enhancements, data source. Oh my gosh, thank you, Lord. An Azure Functions host key data source. This is awesome. These you used to have to use an ARM template to go get these host keys after you provisioned an Azure function. It was quite painful. Do they have an event grid on here? Oh my gosh, they have an event grid config. This is so useful. I'll have to put this in a future blog post. I'm so excited about this feature actually, because basically when you have Azure Functions and you want different triggers that you use for Azure Functions, require you to attach that other service to the Azure function. So the event grid, if you're going to set up an event grid topic, you need to provide this key in order for that event grid to push events to the Azure function. And this was very tricky because basically this resource would be lazy loaded when your code was deployed to the Azure function. So I'm wondering if they've got that fixed, because you used to, with Azure Functions and Event Grid specifically, you used to have to employ a technique called a Terraform sandwich, where you run Terraform apply, and then you deploy some code, and then you run Terraform apply again if you want your Event Grid subscription to work. So I'll have to do some experimentation on this, but this is very exciting. Looks like this has been around for a while. It's new to me, but they've added the blob extensions key. No doubt for the BlobTrigger, but all of these kind of correlate to different triggers except for primary and default function key, which of course the primary and default function key are essentially used for authentication. Like if you if you don't make your Azure function public and you want to use basic authentication, you can have like API management or some service like that authenticate with your Azure function just using one of these primary keys. So it's a very simple like auth method, not the best authentication method by any stretch of the imagination, but it can get you going pretty quick. So this is an exciting new find, and I'm very excited to go play with that and use Azure Functions. If you want to see more about Azure Functions, put some comments, and maybe I'll prioritize that topic for future episodes. What else we got here? Data source for service bus namespace. Okay. It exports the endpoint. Okay, that I could see how that would be nice. Although I'm not sure why you couldn't just build the endpoint. I guess different sovereign clouds might have different endpoint names, so it would reduce some complexity there. But it's a nice improvement. Kubernetes cluster node resource group ID. So when you deploy an AKS cluster, you can leave this blank. It's an optional field. If you leave it blank, then you're at the mercy of whatever Azure spits out. But then basically Azure is going to spit out a dynamically generated resource group and dump all your the nodes of your AKS cluster into that resource group. There is a block within the AKS resource that you can set the name of the resource group that you want your nodes to go into, and then Azure will create a resource group by that name. This clearly is a convenience feature that they're adding, in that you can go grab the resource group ID. This is not the group name though. It's using the ID, which is the subscription WAC, subscription ID, WAC resource group name, that fully qualified path to the resource group. So it's purely a convenience feature that allows you to get the path to that resource group. I'm not sure what context you'd super need that in, but a couple new enhancements to the Kubernetes cluster, AKS cluster. So looks like same thing. The node resource group ID looks like that's on the resource itself. It'll output that. It'll also pick it up on the data source. That's easy pickings. Vertical pod autoscaler. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Is that doing what I think it does? Let's go look at that. Vertical pod autoscaler, AKS Vertical Pod Autoscaler. It looks like this is a preview feature. So, it analyzes. Yeah, this is doing what I thought it would do. So it analyzes and adjusts the processor and memory resources to right size your applications. So rather than horizontal autoscaler, which is adding more pods, this is actually increasing the amount of resources that your pod has based on what AKS detects your pod's needs to be. Interesting feature. That could be problematic. Surely there's constraints on that. Yep. So there's eviction policies in place. Okay, that's cool. Again, it's nice to see preview features added to the Terraform provider, so that you can start using those early. Just bear in mind that things might change, as it's a preview feature. Contracts sometimes change. MSI auth for monitoring. MSI auth for monitoring. Let's go look at that. MSI. So that's managed identity. I'm not sure why it's the acronym's MSI. Microsoft Identity. MSI, managed service identity. So managed identity authentication for monitoring. So clearly this is attaching a managed identity. This is a field on the OMS agent block. So you specify the log analytics workspace ID, which is required, and then now you can enable or disable whether it's using MSI auth. That's MSI auth AKS for logging. Container insights. Generic stuff about managed identity. For logging, for monitoring and logging. Monitor AKS. Let's go check this out. Like, why would you want to use a managed identity? I'll have to research this. I'm not quite sure what's up with that. I think the question that this begs is, why would you want to use MSI auth for monitoring? Because you can't attach a managed identity to a log analytics workspace. There's multiple ways you can attach a managed identity to an AKS cluster. So, like, which end of this relationship is the managed identity for? Not quite sure. I'll have to look into that. Kubernetes AKS cluster VM size property of the default node pool is no longer forced new. Can be resized by temporary name for rotation. Okay. So it doesn't. So in Terraform, changing certain attributes can cause resources to be drop created, i.e. force new means drop create. So in this case, they've changed this property on the node pool for VM size. No longer will it force new and drop create. It'll just change the size of the nodes through rotation. So one VM will go down, pods will get shifted to other nodes, and then they'll change the size of that node and bring it back up. Then pods will get moved onto that one, and they'll go down the list, right, and update all the VM sizes. That's a really cool feature, actually. So that's nice that's they've updated that. Some small updates to the different database services: Maria, SQL Server, SQLDB, Azure Monitor Action Group, support the location property. That seems like that would be a very important property that would probably break that resource altogether if you didn't have that, if it's actually required. Azure Virtual Network Peering, support for the triggers property to allow address space synchronization. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out. Peering. Let's look at peering. Virtual network peering. What was it? Triggers. Learned something new about triggers. Interesting. So the example usage of triggers, the remote address space. It's like you're joining. So we have two VNets, okay? VNet 1, VNet 2. We create a peering from 1 to 2 and then 2 to 1. And then each one has this trigger attribute, and it specifies the remote address space. And we're using the join function, and we're joining the virtual network 2's address space. Oh, because that is an array, which makes sense. So join is an array-based operation. So they're basically taking this array of address spaces, and then they're adding commas. They're creating a comma delimited list here. So that's interesting. A mapping of key value pairs that can be used to sync network routes from the remote network to the local network. Okay. So this will automatically create routes between the remote address space and the local one. It just has to be, I suppose, comma delimited, which is pretty nasty. And this is a pretty elegant way of doing that using the join function. So that's interesting. I'll have to do some experimentation of when you would need this, because I've done VNet peering, and I don't think I've had to use triggers in order to add the routes. Maybe I've just had really simple network scenarios. I don't know. Bug fixes. Let's look for anything that stands out. OpenID Connect token file path. More provider issues. App Insights, Analytics item, CDN, front door, looks like some front door features being added. Digital twins, that's for IoT, a lot of IoT hub updates. Marking the resource is gone when it's been deleted outside of Terraform. So this is a lot of drift. So apparently the IoT stuff didn't have very good drift detection. So that looks like that's been fixed. Validation logic for the DNS prefix. Okay, that could be annoying. I'm not sure if that's a blocker or if it didn't validate, and it would be like an apply time issue where you would deploy an invalid DNS prefix and then ARM would shoot you down and be like, nope, that's not happening. Fix health check eviction time. What else we got? NGINX, Synapse, web app active slot. Yeah, a lot of drift detection. So that's it. One new resource, just very minor Sentinel resource. Some pretty significant, I would say, having personally used Azure Functions updates that I've discovered. It's new to me, right? With these host keys for the Azure Functions. And then looks like some pretty cool new features for AKS preview features. So that's it. That's for this week. And I hope you're enjoying the channel. The fun stuff really happens in my episodes. So I hope you check out that content as well. But each week, I check out the release notes. I might as well do it in front of a camera, right? I hope you enjoy this as I think about, these features that are being added and discovering, live, features and white space in my knowledge on the Azure platform and within the Terraform providers itself. So I'm just trying to be fully open and transparent as I discover new things as well. And hopefully you find that useful and or entertaining. Anyways, that's it for this episode. We'll probably see another release next Friday. Until next time, this is Azure Terraformer signing off. Cheers.